Good day and welcome to Numeracy in Mathematics 1. Today we're going to discuss Unit 1 and see what is it that is expected from you as a student in terms of Unit 1. Now first of all, let's look at the outcomes of learning for Unit 1. The very first thing is that the aim of this unit is to help students to develop activities and lesson plan that will cover the following area: sequencing, comparing, classification, counting, colors, shape, size, measurements in terms of time, capacity, length, and math. So what the whole unit is focusing on is more on the issue that you should be able to develop activities, and you must be able to develop a lesson plan that you can give to your learners or that you can teach your learner. You know that as a teacher, on an everyday basis, you need to prepare and plan a lesson for the next day that you are going to teach. So it is very critical that you should master the concept of how to set up an activities and how to set up a lesson plan. And this is what we are going to look in details on. What is required for you to be able to set up a good lesson plan, a lesson plan that you know that it will have benefit to your learners, and at the end of the day, when you are done teaching the lesson, you know that you have achieved your objectives. Students should be able to develop materials also for teaching and demonstrating concept in pre-primary levels. As you are doing your lesson preparation, there is a part where you have to set up activities or where you have to prepare activities for your learners so that they can be able to understand the concept of the topic that you are teaching. So it is very critical that you must know which materials to take, which materials to use, which ones not to use, and it is very critical that you should always use materials that are very well known to students, to your learners, that your learners know that this type of materials they are used to it in everyday's life. They are using it at home. They use it when they are playing, wherever they are encountering these materials. It is very critical to focus on those materials, because then the learners will understand it far much better when they are used to the materials. Now, activities and lesson plan. In this section, students need to know how to set up activities and lesson plan that will help learners to understand the following concept at pre-primary level. Now, the very first one is sequencing. When you are teaching sequencing, for example, you are teaching how things are following up on one another. And you need to look for example, materials or activities that are also following up one another, that they are experiencing on their daily basis. So you can talk in terms of things like, for example, days of the week. What is the sequence of the days of the week? For example, is Monday is followed by Tuesday, followed by Wednesday, followed by Thursday and Friday. So that is now sequencing. So when you are going to look for materials that are where you want to convey the message of sequencing, you can either use, for example, the tall learner to the short learner, or the short learner to the tall one. You make them stand in the line. Those are the type of activities that you can have, so that they can know that what is the sequence. We start from the tall person to the shortest one, or the other way around. And also comparing, you also need to have a lesson plan that is talking about, for example, when you are comparing objects or comparing things, you can compare, for example, things like colors. You can compare things like size of objects, and you can help them to identify which one is bigger, which one is smaller, or which one is taller, this one is shorter, and stuff like that. And also you can also help them to compare things that they are using. For example, in their everyday life, they can compare soccer teams, they can compare the scores of their tests and so on, so that they can see, okay, which one have scored more and which one have scored less, and so on. So that is when we talk in terms of comparing. You need to have a lesson plan. You need to have activities for that. We're gonna go in details on what is supposed to be done in an activity and what is to be done in a lesson plan. But you also need to teach them classification. Also, you must have activities for classification, and you need to have activity or lesson plans for where you teach classification, where they classify object according to their characters, either according to their color or according to the material, or according to their size, or according to the shapes or the way they look. Then you can help them to do this classification. So when you talk about classification, you mostly talk about things whereby you order things according to the way a certain command or a certain instruction. You are being given an instruction, for example, put all the round objects together, put all the squares together, and then you can you can see how the learners are classifying this object according to, probably you can say according to metals, or according to those that are wood, you put them together. Those that are metals, you put them together. Those that are plastics, you put them, so you can classify them according to their characteristic. And then the other one is counting. You can also have a lesson. You must know how to set up a lesson plan for, or an activity for counting, whereby you teach your learner how to count from 0 to 100 or from 0 to 1000. So these ones you can have a lot of, when you talk in terms of activity, you can have things like objects that they are counting. They count using their objects, or you can have posters where they are learning how to count and learning how to see the numbers as they are counting. Or you can have any other things like worksheets, or maybe songs that you are using for them to be able to learn how to count, or an activity that you can help, or that can help them to be able to count. And it's very good if you can have those physical objects that they can use for them to be able to count. And then there is the issue of color. In the issue, when you are teaching them, or you have activity for coloring, you can have uncolored posters, and you ask them to color for example, you have a drawing of a butterfly. Usually what they do is, when you look at this, say for example you have a butterfly like this one, and that's your butterfly. Now you are asking them to color the shade of the wings, and this helps the learners also to be able to understand what is the wings. For example, these are the wings that the butterfly is flying with. So you can help them, and you can tell them, color the wings, for example, green. And then they can put the green for the one wing there. And then you can say the left wing should be, for example, red. And then they can color it with red. I'm just drawing this because I don't have a color pencil or coloring. So that is how you teach them. And then you can say, for example, the bottom must be blue, for example. So this is the whole body here, and then you can color it blue, the whole body here. And that is how you teach them how they should color objects and so on. And then shapes also is also one of the things that you need to give them. For example, they need to know how to color shape, or how to draw shapes or different shapes. You can have them to draw triangles, you can have them to draw rectangles, parallelogram, rectangles, squared, and all those things, even circles. And also you can also have activity whereby you teach the learners about size. For example, size of an object and so on. Now when you talk about size, then it's best to have similar objects, but that has different sizes. So in other words, you can have a small one. Even if you have circles, you can have circles. One is a small one, the other one is bigger, and the other one is becoming bigger, and so on. And then you can have activities for that. And then you also have to teach them counting. You have to teach them number sense. You have to teach them pre-number concept, and all those pre-number skills that the learners must be able to master. And you must teach them measurements of mass, time, capacity, and length. For all these things, you need to come up with an activity, and you need to come up with a lesson plan. Now, activities should have the following concept. Now, let's look at the activities. We first look at the activity. What is the major things that in your activity, there must be these following things. If your activity does not have these things, then it doesn't reach the goal or what is intended to. The very first thing is an activity must have an aim and objectives. of what the student should know at the end of the activity. Now, the aim is a long-term goal that at the end of the activity, I want learners to know, for example, they should be able to master counting, for example, or sequences, or whatever they want, they have to master. And the objective is the goal that you want them to achieve during that lesson. For example, they must count from 1 to 50. Your aim is for them to be able to count, but your objective is to count from 1 to 50. Your immediate objective means that the immediate thing that you want them to master during that lesson. Although your long-term aim is for them to be able to count probably up to 1,000. But your aim right now, or your objective right now, is to help them to count up to 50 or to count up to 100. That is what you want to achieve in that lesson. In the next lesson, probably you can help them to count from 50 going up to 100, or from 100 going up to 200. So that is what you, so each and every activity, the very first thing that it must have an aim and objective. What is it that you want to teach these learners today in this activity? Do you want the activity to help them to sort out things? You want the activity to help them identify shapes, or see different shapes, or different colors, or be able to color different objects? Or what is the aim and objective of the activities? So that is the very first thing that you need to put into your activity. And you can write it right there on top and say that aims and objectives. So the aims and objective is for you to achieve this goal and that goal, so that you can know that when I'm going to give this activity to the learners, what I actually want them to know at the end of the day is this and this and this. And that is the aim and objective of the activity. Now, another thing that about activity, attractive and fun for kids to take part, especially material use. You know that we are teaching the young mind. Now, this young mind like to see things that are attractive and that are fun. So your activity, when you are setting up your activity, make sure that it is fun and it is attractive. Now, what do we mean with fun and attractive? It means that the learners must be able to enjoy it. The materials that you are using must attract the attention of the learners, so that they can be able to take part and use these materials. And one thing to do that, or one way to do that, is giving the materials that they are used to. Materials that they are using on a daily basis, things that they are used to, for example, toys and blah, blah, that they like to play with. So you can use those things to actually reach your goals of a lesson, whether it is now counting or shapes or coloring or whatever. Then the learner will be able to know and to understand what is it that you want to achieve during that, and also considering your aims and objective in that you have in the previous lesson. So activities must be attractive and it must be fun. So it must capture the attention of the learner. It must keep the attention of the learner onto these activities, so that they cannot lose concentration and start looking somewhere else or start doing other funny things, because learners get easily bored, especially those young ones. They get easily bored at pre-primary school. If you are having activities that are not really attractive, not really fun to them, because they like to play. So if your activity is not fun and attractive, then they will not really take part in your activity, and you will not be able to achieve your objectives and your aims, because they already lose concentration and so on. So the aim of this attractiveness and fun is to keep the concentration of the learner at all time to the activity, so that they can be able to understand what is it that you want to teach them. And it should be fit for purpose and grade. In other words, when you are drafting up or setting up your activity, it must meet the criteria or the level of the learner. Don't set up too high, don't set up too low. You must just set up in the middle. And in your activity, it's better to have things that are a bit also high and things that are a bit also low, because you're going to have learners who are, the gifted learners who are getting easily bored if the activities are easy for them to do. So it must be a bit challenging, but you must also know that you will, in the same class, you will also have learners who are very slow to understand things. So you must have those other activities for them so that they can help them to come to the middle and help them to go up to the top ones. So in your activities, make sure that it is fit for purpose. In other words, it meets the level of the learners, whether it is grade, it's a pre-primary school, or is it a grade 1, or and so on. So it must meet that level and fit for that purpose of the grade and the level of the grade. Don't put up too difficult things, because then they will also lose concentration. But you must have 1 or 2 difficult ones for 1 or 2 learners who are gifted. There are those gifted learners who can master things very easily. And then setting up an activity, continue. It should be engaging all learners at levels, at different levels of complexity. That's what I was referring to. Learners are not all at the same level of complexity, although they are all in the same grade. So some learners are a bit clever than the others, and the others are a bit slow or retarded than the others, slow to understand things. So you need to cater for those groups also. You need to cater for actually 3 groups: the clever one, the middle one, and the low and the slow one, so that your activity can cater for all these students and meet all their needs. Otherwise, you will lose some of them. They will not be able to concentrate, or will not be able to understand what you are talking about, or others will become just bored, especially those clever ones. They usually get bored if they know the things, or they know the answers of the things of the activity that you are giving them. Also, it's also good to give activities that are new to them, not always giving them, for example, games that they are already aware of and they know. So it's not anymore challenging, but it's just something that they just do it. But it's good for them to learn a new game, a new activity, and new ways of doing things, and so on. And then it should follow a certain pattern that learner could master easily. When you are giving your activities must follow a pattern. It must not jump from this part to that part. It must follow a pattern, or in other words, become, in terms of complexity level, it must go from well-known activities to unknown activities, so that you can help them to move from what they know to what they don't know. So, and it must have a pattern that it follows, not haphazardly. You teach here this, and then your activity on this side is asking something else, and your lessons are asking something else, and so on. It must follow a certain pattern whereby they follow steps by steps to say that first you do this, and then secondly you do that, thirdly you do that. And then it should be challenging, educative, and rewarding to the learner. Now, if your activities are not challenging, or it is not educative, or it is not rewarding, you will not reach your aims and objectives. So you must have activities that will challenge learners, activities that are educative to the learners, and that are rewarding. At the end of the day, for example, if you have an activity and a learner really achieved something very good, or he did the activity very well, it's nice to give that learner a sweet, or just something as a token of appreciation, to say that, well done. And then the thing must challenge them. As we said, that don't just give things that are easy for them to understand, easy for them to do, and then they become bored. It must challenge their thinking. It must challenge their ways of doing things. And then you will know that, okay, now I have achieved my goals, because the thing was challenging them and is educative and is educating them. It means that it's taking them from what they know to what they don't know. And they, at the end of the lesson, they are able, or at the end of that activity, they are able to know that this is something new that I didn't know, that I have learned now. And it must be rewarding, as we say. So you can reward them in terms of marks, giving them good marks, because it makes them feel good if they have good marks and they see that they have scored high. It's also a reward. Reward is not only just you give them a pen or a sweet or what, but also to praise them. You can also reward them, for example, to make them the first 5 who are maybe high marks, they come and stand in front, and the others, they clap hands for them because they achieve very well. That is also a way of showing that you are rewarding them because they feel proud, they feel that they did something that their colleagues or friends did not do. And that is very, very important, and it must be done throughout the activity so that you can have the best learners. You can also have them, for example, have their names on the wall. Those who have done good, their names are there on the wall, and they know that, wow, I have done good, and my name is always there on the board. For example, for this week, their name can stay there and for the whole week, and next week when you have another activity, those best ones, their name can also be there. Learners enjoy activity where they need to handle toys. So you must know that when you have activities, learners must not just observe the activity, but they must handle the toys. They must move, maneuver things, and move objects, and touch objects, and, you know, handle the objects. That makes them more interactive and participative. Because if you are not giving them things that they can handle and they have just to watch and observe, they might even fall asleep and not take part and do the things that they're supposed to do. Now let's go over to the lesson plan. For example, if you have been asked to put up a lesson plan, what are the things that you need to have in your lesson plan? Lesson plan are almost similar to the activities that we were just talking about. First of all, you must have an aim and objective that is clear and achievable. That at the end of this lesson, I want my learners to do this and that and that and that, or to understand this and this and this. And when you are putting your lesson plan, we always advise people not to, you must put verbs in your objectives that are achievable or that are measurable. Don't put verbs in your lesson plan. For example, you are saying at the end of the lesson, learner must be able to understand. How will you know that the learners have understand? You must put an objectives that is measurable. You can be able to measure. For example, if you say at the end of the lesson, learner must be able to describe. At the end of the lesson, learners must be able to name. Or at the end of the lesson, learner must be able to count up to 100. That is measurable. You can measure and ask the learner, lesson, can you count up to 100? If that learner count up to 100, then you know that your aim and objective is achieved for that lesson. But if you say to understand, how will you know that the learner understand? For you to know that the learner understand, you have to ask question. And for them to answer that question, they either have to name or to describe or to what, and that's what you should put in your objectives. So you must have things like at the end of the lesson, learner must be able to understand, not to understand, but learner must be able to describe, to name, to highlight, or to there are so many verbs that you can use, either describe, name, calculate, count, and all those type of verbs that you can use for them. But you must just make sure that the verb is measurable. You can measure the verb. If you are having a verb that is not measurable, then you must know that your aim and objectives usually is not correct. Now, when we are marking, for example, in an examination or in an assignment, we look at the verbs. What is the verbs that you're using? Are you saying the learners must be able to do what? That verb is very critical because it describes what is it that the learners will do at the end of the lesson for you to be able to know that they master it. The introduction should be based on everyday's activity that learners can relate to. It's always very important for you to look at, when you have an introduction, it must cover things that they are exposed to, things that they are used to, things that they usually do in their daily life, so that you can know that, okay, when I'm having this introduction, it captures the attention. You can have an introduction where you just ask, for example, what did you eat for breakfast? How many different type of food did you eat for breakfast? Then the learner will say, no, I ate bread, eggs, tea, or whatever, and there was butter or whatever. Then you say, how many are they? There are 4. And then you can start teaching learners, for example, counting 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So that is one way of doing it. The theme and topic should be according to the syllabi. In other words, when you look at the theme of the topic and the theme and the topic of your lesson, it must be according to the syllabi. it must match what is in the syllabus. You have to look at the syllabus. What is it that you should teach the learners? So that you cannot teach topics and themes that are not really related to the syllabi or what they're supposed to know in the syllabi. So the syllabi should act as a guide here to show you that what must be in the lesson. The body should contain the main content of the subject, what learners should know, do, and master. The body is the most critical part of the lesson as well, because it must contain the whole content of the lesson. What is it all about? What is the subject? What is it that they must know? What is it that they must master? That one, you put it in the content. And then also, you must also look at things. What is it that they must know? And what is it that they must master? And the subject content, for example, if this is in accounting or multiplication, we want to see it right in the content to say that I'm going to teach 1 plus 1 plus 3, or I'm going to teach 1 multiplied by what, or what is the sequence that I'm going to teach. I'm going to teach odd numbers, or I'm going to teach what numbers. It must be in the body, so that the one who's going to look at your lesson can see that, oh, okay, this is what you are going to cover. And you must know that what is in the body must be related to the objectives that you are having. So if your objective is to teach learners to count up to 100, you can't have something like divisions in your body. So it must be something related to the objectives and also to the theme. And then there should be a conclusion. Now, usually in the conclusion is a recap of the main points of the lesson. This can be questions or narrative forms. In other words, you ask questions or you repeat that what you were teaching during the body or the lesson, and then you repeat the main part of the thing, of the body, or the main points in the lesson that you want them to master. And a class or homework activity for learners should also do. In other words, in the conclusion, you can also give them, for example, a worksheet or questions that they go and answer at home, or things that they need to go and find out at home. But there must be something that they need to do after the lesson, so that they can use that the knowledge and the skills that they learn, the theoretical knowledge that they learn in the lesson, they can use it at home or whenever they go for their homework, so that they can be able to use that. Remedial work should be available in the lesson plan, both to slow and fast learner. Now, remedial work means if you have these learners that are fast and you have these learners that are slow, how is it that you're going to help these learners to be able to be competent? Those that are too advanced, you need to give them those challenging tasks. Those that are in the middle, you give them this normal task. And you must have also some tasks for those that are slow, so that you can help them. Especially the slow learners, what teachers are supposed to do is to give them more work, so that they can do more practice, more exercises for them to come up to the middle and all the way up to the excellent, to become an excellent learner or to master the topic. Other things for setting up a lesson plan is the materials. Very, very critical that if you are having a lesson plan, teachers should develop teaching materials to be used during that lesson. This includes blackboard, the ruler, the pencil, the marker, activity sheet, exercise books, toys, posters, flip charts, and any other improving materials like ropes, boxes, and sticks. Learning or teaching material should do the following. The main aim of teaching materials is to make the lesson interesting, make learning easy for the learner to understand, help the content to be in the middle of the child's longer, in the mind of the child longer. In other words, if you have this teaching material, the learner will remember that pencil that you were using, or that stone that you were using, or that toy that you were using. For the learner, he or she remember that for a long time, because that's what is in his mind. Those are the things that help them to understand and to remember things and so on. Help the teacher to deliver the content, and should connect what is known by the learner to what is not known. Main aim of whatever material that you're using is that make sure that that material is taking what the learners know and it connected to what the learners don't know, so that there can be a connection between the two. Actually, material should help the learners to because he or she knows the material, and that material you can use it to teach the learner the thing that he or she does not know. And that is the most important part of a material, is for teaching and for remembering. Now, group work sometimes also is also part of your lesson plan. So if you're having a lesson plan, we said you must make sure that you have good teaching materials, and you can also have group work, you can have pair work, you can have whole class work, or you can have individual work. It doesn't matter which one you choose, but it depends on the topic that you are teaching. So group work is where they work in group. You can divide them in 7 or 5 groups. If you are having 20 learners in a class, you can divide them 5, 5, 5, 5, and you have 4 groups. Or you can have 10 and 10. It depends on what is the activity. That is now group work. Pair work is where you have two people working on an issue, but those issues differ from the others. For example, these ones are working on coloring the yellow part. This group is working on coloring the green part, and so on and so on. Or you say this group is coloring the legs, this one is coloring the body or whatever. But usually pair work is two people working on one project and the others are working on another project. Whole class work, in other words, the class all of them get the same work and they have to do it right there in the class. It's a class work. And or individual work. Individual work, it means that everyone is on his own. When you talk about class work, the difference between class work and individual work is that class work, the whole class work together to achieve a goal. But individual work is that everyone works together, works on its own to achieve the goal or to come up to the answer. So that is the difference. As a teacher, you should know what type of work fits the lesson topic and the environment, as well as the situation surrounding your classroom. You have to look in your classroom. What type of classroom do you have? What type of tools or materials do you have? Do you have enough materials for each one of them to have one? Or do you have few materials and you can group them so that they can work 5 or 10 on these materials and so on? And you must also look how your classroom looks like. Some of the classes, the desk cannot move, so it's difficult to make a group work. So you can take them outside and have them in different groups under the tree or something, and they should work on that thing. Should you opt for group work, the activity should be such that it involves everyone and all have some responsibility to contribute to the task, because this is a major flow in group works. Sometimes you have learners, there are 5 of them, and they are working on an object, but only 2 of the 5 are doing the work. The other 3 are just, they're hiking there, hanging in there and not knowing what to do and what. And those who knows what to do, they do all the work and they take over. And that is not a good thing. So as a teacher, you should supervise and see whether everyone is having a task in a group, and everyone has a responsibility, and everyone is taking part in the group. That is very critical for you to be able to put the responsibility to each and every one of them, so that every one of the learner must be able to take part in the activity. Some are lazy, some are just ignorant, they don't know what to do. So what they do is they just take the back seat. And especially those who knows what to do, they want to do everything themselves. So you need to stop them and say, no, you give the chance not to him to do this, or you give the chance to the other one to do that, so that they can have equal share in the group. So group work need a lot of supervision. Not just give group work and you go and sit as a teacher. You give group work and you walk around from group to group to group and hear what they are complaining, hear what their problems is, and see how you can solve these problems that they are discussing with you. That is very critical. So group work is not just giving work and going and relax. It's about you also being part of these groups and go around and help them. Other things to consider when setting up a lesson, we say is the lesson should have an introduction that would capture the learner's attention, should relate to what the learners know. In other words, when you are having that lesson, the lesson must be able to relate to what the learners know or have been experiencing in their everyday life, and you take that to what they don't know. That is very, very critical. And then can be in a form of questions like the introduction. You can also have it in a form of a question like, how many different types of food did you eat for breakfast this morning? Learners will answer bread, eggs, wheat bix, or oats. Then the teacher introduces numbers, for example. Or you can ask, for example, which team did, especially the boys, they like soccer. You can ask them which team win yesterday, maybe Brave Warriors or whatever, and you ask them by how much. And then when they give you the score, you can introduce numbers. Or you can ask them, how many are you at your house? Then they have to count, no, we are 7 in the house. Then you introduce numbers. You can ask them so many things. There are so many things that as long as you have the answer that is talking about numbers or whatever the topic is that you want to teach, and then you can introduce the topic. In the introduction, the teacher should set up the pace, invite curiosity, and prepare the mind of the learner for the rest of the lesson. In other words, in that introduction, as you capture the mind of the learners with these things that they are doing every day, you capture them, and then you bring them to the topic, and you set up the pace. In other words, is it a slow lesson, is it a fast lesson, or how is the lesson going to proceed? And also you invite curiosity, make them curious to want to know more. What is it that the teacher wants to teach us today? Now, if they are curious and they want to hear what is it that you want to bring to them, to their attention, by asking them, what food did you eat? Or how many different type of foods did you eat this morning? So the learners want to know, for example, what is it all about? So you make them curious to want to know more, and that is how you bring in the topic that you want them to learn during that day, during that time of the lesson, or during that period. And then basic competencies. I wanted to explain a bit of what is the basic competency. Usually in the lesson plan, you also have the basic competency that. Now, the basic competency describe what the competency skills you want the learners to accomplish. Now, competency, the skills that you want, for example, you want the learners to master counting, or sequences, or you want the learners to master identification of color. That is the skills that you want to bring over in that lesson. So you can have maybe the lesson today we want to talk about the various colors. Now you want the learners to know or to name the colors and to be able to show you the different colors. This one is yellow, this one is red, this one is what. That is a skill that you want to teach, identification of color. So then it must be in the basic competency. E.g., for example, learners should be able to arrange, sort object according to size, color, or shape. That is the skills that you want to teach during that lesson. For example, you want them to know how to arrange things. So you can help them, the skill that you want them to master, or the competency that you want in your learners after that lesson, is that they must be able to arrange things, for example, from small to big, or round objects together, or big to small and stuff like that. Or sort object according to their color, or size, or shapes of materials, or what. That is the competency that you want the learner to master. You must have a competency that you want the learners to master during that lesson. Now, learner must master counting principle in order to develop rational counting and later number sense. This is now counting principle when we are talking about counting principles. So for them to master, they must master the counting principles in order to develop those rational counting and later the number sense and so on. One-to-one correspondence refer to matching object to numbers. In other words, when you're talking about one-to-one correspondence, we say it's one object and you connect one number to that object, which is 1. Second object, you connect 2 to that object. Third object, you connect 3, and it goes on like that. So that is one-to-one correspondence that you need to teach your learners. For example, if you want to teach them counting principles, is that one object only have one number. The second number goes to the second object, the third number goes to the third object, and it goes on like that. So that they cannot say, this is 1, and then you ask, where is 2? Still the same object. Where is 3? Still the same object. Learners can do that. especially those young ones. So you need to teach them that you can only have one object with one number, connected or linked to one number. The second number goes to the second object. The third number goes to the third object, and that is how they learn to count up to 10 and so on and go up to 100. And then the stable order rules refer to the correct order of numbers like 1, then after 1 comes 2, after 2 comes 3, after 3 comes 4. You cannot count like 2, 1, 3, 4, 6, 5, like that. Learners can count like that, but you need to help them with the stable order rule that a number is followed by a one number bigger than the other. So it's 1, after 1 comes 2, after 2 comes 3, after 3 comes 4, after 4 comes 5, and stuff like that. So that is the rule that you need to teach them to master the stable order rule. And then order irrelevant rule refer to the idea that when we are counting object, it doesn't matter which one we start with, it will still count the same amount of numbers. So if you're having a lot of objects and you know the one-to-one corresponding, say, one object, one number. Now if you're having 5 objects, it doesn't matter which one you start with. That is now the order irrelevant rule. It says that even if you start with this 5 one and you call it 1, then the next one you call it 2, 3, 4, 5. Even if you start in the middle, you still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it doesn't matter which one is which, as long as one number is assigned to an object, the order irrelevant rule says that there will still be 5 objects. It doesn't matter which one you start with at first. And then cardinal rules refer to the number given to the last object as the total number of objects. If you're having 5 objects in a row, and somebody is asking you, how many objects do you have there? The cardinal rule says that the last number that you mention, if you say 1, 2, 3, 4, then the last object is 4, then you have 4 objects. If your last number that you name is 5, then you have 5 objects. If it's 6, then you have 6 objects. That is the cardinal rule. The last number that you mention, that is the number of objects that you are having. And the measurements of time, mass, and capacity and length. Now here we are not going to discuss or do some calculation on time, mass, capacity, and length, but we're going to discuss the basic things that you need to know in terms of these measurements. Time refers to the length of time lapse, e.g. seconds, minutes, hours, days, months, and years. That is what we need to know, because in numeracy and mathematics too, you're going to do the calculation of these things. Now, you need to know what is time. Time refers to a time lapse or a length of time lapse that passes, or time that is to come. So time is all about what is lapse or what is to come. For example, you are going to say, I'm going to finish my school in 2 years' time. Or I have finished my examination 2 days ago. That was time past. I'm going to finish in 2 years' time. That is time to come, 2 years to come, that I have to go and sit and wait for or do my studies and so on, so that I can be able to graduate. So it can be in seconds. You must know what is seconds. You must teach your learner what is seconds, what is minutes, what is hours, what is days, what is month, what is years. Very critical that they must know the difference between these things. Mass refers to the amount of matter in an object. Learner must distinguish light object from heavy object. Very, very critical that you need to teach them. And you can have these materials in your classroom and give them heavy object, they must pick up. You give them light object, they must pick up, so that they can see the difference in mass in these two objects. And then capacity and length. Capacity refers to the volume that an object can hold. Learner must be able to see which container have bigger volume than the others. They should guess and predict volumes by looking at it. In other words, you can have a glass which is big, a big one like this, or you can have 2 glasses like this one, and you tell them which one is bigger. The learner must be able to look at these 2 objects and see this one is bigger than this one. So those are the things that you need to teach them, and you need to show them these things so that they can see. Now, lengths refer to the distance and measurements of object from one point to the other. In other words, if you are having this pen from this point to this point, that is your length, the length of this ruler. Now you need to teach them, especially when you are talking about any other object or any other things, for example, the distance from school to home and so on, you need to teach them that which one is far, which one is, they should be able to distinguish which one is far, is it the shop or is it the school from their home. So they must master these kind of things. Learners should measure standard and non-standard object using measuring tools and also with non-standard measuring tools. In other words, standard object is objects that you can measure and they are measurable. For example, I can measure the volume of this pen. If I have the length, the diameter, the radius and so on, I can measure the volume of this pen. But there are some other objects like a stone which I cannot measure the volume. So you need to teach them how to measure a volume of a stone. For example, you have water like this in the measuring cylinder. You have half here the water, and then you immerse the object in the water and the water will rise, and the difference there, that will be the volume of that irregular object or irregular tools that you want to measure. Now let's talk a bit about assessment. At pre-primary learners level, learners are not failing any grade, but the teacher should do assessment both during lesson activity and during the year. You need to do assessment. Although in a pre-primary we don't do examination and stuff, but you need to assess your learner and see their levels of understanding of things. The aim of assessment should be to aid those learners who are having difficulty in mastering concept. In other words, you help and you assist those ones that you see that, oh, they are not performing or not understanding these topics and so on. You help them to get to understand the topic and to be able to do those topics. Assessment should be in line with your lesson objective. What you wanted the learner to achieve, that is what you should assess whether they have achieved it. So you cannot have an assessment that is not really talking to your objectives and so on. And then assessment should cover all content competency in the syllabi. And the syllabi, it must cover the whole content. Don't just ask just a few things and you leave the others. Because when the learners are learning, they are learning the whole content. So you need to have something out of each topic and so on that you are assessing, so that you can see whether the learners really master all the topics. Assessment should cater for slow and fast learner. In other words, there must be easy and difficult things. Assessment should cater for gifted learner and learners with disability. Now, in conclusion, I would just want to thank you. And if you have any questions, you can ask. You can contact me between 5 and 8 for any questions that you need to know.